Welcome back, everybody, to more from the Sable Lions, and I'm here today with Jordan. How's it going, Jordan?
Pretty well, thank you.
That's good, and we are having a look at how to beat Blacephalon GX. This deck has seen a lot of play and a lot of hype due to its recent regional success in America, and it seems to do reasonably well against some of the big decks in the format at the moment, Jordan.
It does do well against quite a few of them, but it also struggles against quite a few of them. And there's a lot of different decks that have very easy answers to Blacephalon, so we can talk about what some of those decks are and how to deal with Blacephalon with those matchups.
Yeah, beautiful. So it's got a few good matchups and a few bad ones, like everything. There's always going to be some good and some bad. For Blacephalon, the reason that it's done really, really well in America from the other side of the world, from Australian perspective, is that in America, lots of people play Reshiram, lots of people play Stall, and there's not a lot of other stuff floating around that is too dangerous to Blacephalon. Would you agree, Jordan?
Yeah, and one of the things that we also see in the US is when we see Zoroark list topping, we don't really see too many Dugong like we do in Australia, where we see Dugong being played in a lot of the top Australian players' lists, but in the US we haven't really seen a lot of Dugong as much as we've seen Slowking and more recently Silvally, which is a lot better for Blacephalon to deal with than Dugong is.
Yeah, it's got a lot of good matchups against decks that are being played quite a lot. Reshiram, Stall, and Silvally, all good matchups for Blacephalon. It's pretty even against Pikachu, Zekrom, depending on what cards you play as Blacephalon or what cards they play. It could go either way. Who wins the coin flip sometimes is all that really matters. Obviously, playing itself is an even matchup, and sometimes it can be a little bit hit and miss with Malamar variants. Sometimes they can just be like Ultra Necrozma, you can just kind of race and see who gets there first.
Yeah, especially with the fact that Gascan isn't being played too much anymore, and Gascan was typically a much harder matchup for Blacephalon than Ultra Necrozma is. There are, of course, the options of playing a few decks to swing the matchup in either player's favour, but as of right now, I would say that Malamar is fairly even overall.
Yeah, 100%. And some bad matchups. There's obviously going to be a bit of a struggle when it comes to playing Zoroark Dugong. We'll talk about more about that in a second. QUAGSIRE Naganadel also is pretty rough. One prize attackers that knock you out every turn is a problem. And ZAPDOS JIRACHI also seems like a really, really tough matchup for Blacephalon. Obviously, all games are winnable if everything goes well, but probably going to struggle to beat those three.
Just in general, non-EX attackers are pretty annoying for Blacephalon. It's a deck that is built to kind of take one-hit KOs on big Pokemon, so when you're trading with Pokemon like Zapdos or QUAGSIRE, and there are quite a few other non-GX Pokemon which Blacephalon doesn't like to trade with. Some that come to mind are Weezing or Gramble. There's certainly a lot out there, but the two biggest ones in our eyes is Zapdos and QUAGSIRE.
Yeah, absolutely tough matchups for Blacephalon. So if there's lots of Blacephalon in your area and you want to try and beat it, then these are the things that you can do for each of those kind of decks and variants. We'll talk about them. First of all, Reshiram. This is the deck that Blacephalon is played to beat. So if you're playing Reshiram, people playing Blacephalon to beat you, and it's really tough. We were really struggling to find ways that Reshiram can consistently get itself into a winning position over Blacephalon.
It's really tough because Blacephalon takes three prizes with each attack realistically, so it only really needs 2 knockouts to win the game. We have a look at the top right corner of the screen, we see that Eevee Snorlax is a much bigger part of this deck now than it used to be, and Eevee Snorlax is pretty useless against this kind of deck because it doesn't get the added damage for I forget what the attack's name is.
Dump Trunk Press.
And he does 120 to a Blacephalon, which is far from ideal, so we're kind of having to rely on some of these non-GX/tech attackers that the list plays, such as Volcanion, which is the one that most lists are playing, does 110 damage for 2 energy, which is fine. Yeah. Like, it's not really going to be what wins you the matchup, but it's at least something that can kind of offset the prize trade a bit for you, but the one that I think is going to be a bit more impactful is that Arcanine, which is obviously not as common, a bit hard to get out, but if you do get it out, you will eventually be able to deal 190 damage in one hit and swing the prize trade into your favour instead of just trading evenly.
Yeah, and you can also use Flareon GX if you choose to include it to Bright Flame to take a knockout on a Blacephalon. That means that the trade is going to be even, so you can force them to take 3 big knockouts instead of just the 2. But Reshiram Charizard really struggles to find ways to stop Blacephalon doing what it does best. Blacephalon is at its best when your opponent takes 2 prizes every turn, because you can just Beast Ring and off you go. And Reshiram Charizard is good because it just takes knockouts every turn. It can't do anything other than that, so it's going to struggle.
Yeah, not really. The one thing that is good for Reshiram and Charizard is just the fact that its Pokemon have so much HP that Blacephalon does need to overcommit quite a lot to take those big knockouts. It needs about 6 energy approximately to get a knockout on Reshiram Charizard, maybe less if they've got a multiplier.
Yeah, like 5 in a Choice Band or Beast Energy or whatever it is.
But it is still quite a lot of commitment, and yes, it is worth it to get all those energy into play because you're taking 3 prizes, but it's still a lot to ask for, so if you can kind of keep yourself out of Beast Ring for as long as possible, then your opponent might struggle to get up to those numbers.
Yeah, and if worse does come to worse, then trying to remove as many energy from the board that Blacephalon has in play is probably the best way to go. They need to commit so much to get 1 knockout. Maybe you can get rid of 1 or 2 energy that have been left there and stop them from being able to get the easy second knockout. But yeah, it's going to be tough. If you're playing Reshiram Charizard and you're trying to beat Blacephalon, then my recommendation would be play a different deck because it's probably not going to work.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Zoroark, we've got a page on variants here because there are a lot of Zoroark variants floating around at the moment. Some of them are good and some of them are bad against Blacephalon. Silvally, as we were talking about before, is going to be a bit of a struggle, but if you're playing Zoroark and you can fit it, the absolute #1 top tier best card to beat Blacephalon is Dugong. Dual Blizzard not only knocks out a Blacephalon, but it also snipes on the bench. So if you do, I don't know, 120 damage to a Naganadel or something like that, then you can take 3 prizes, skip Beast Ring turn, and it's a pretty flaccid deck, Blacephalon, when it can't be attaching 60 bajillion energy a turn.
Hey, even better than doing 120 to a Naganadel, you could just do 120 to a second Blacephalon GX and just knock both of them out at once with 1 Dual Blizzard. So
that's true, yeah, you could.
There's certainly plenty of ways to skip Beast Ring, but let's be honest, let's say that even if you couldn't skip Beast Ring, just 1 energy on a non-EX to take a 1-hit KO on Blacephalon with just a single attachment and a choice band is already more than what you need.
Yeah, and which is also what Slowking does. Slowking with a triple accelerated energy and a choice band also one-shots a Blacephalon. So even if you don't play the Dugong, you do have the option to take a knockout with a 1 prize attacker. But missing out on that Beast Ring skip is probably going to set you back a little bit. Another card that some people have played in the past, but we don't really see a lot of now, is Giratina. You play Giratina in Zoroark in order to get that Beast Ring skip, doing 120 and then finding a knockout in the active. If you're not willing to commit multiple slots to a Dugong line, then maybe a 1 Giratina line is going to be enough to get you across the line to skip that Beast Ring.
It's certainly a little harder to pull off. You do need to, as you mentioned earlier, say do 120 damage to a Naganadel, and then use Distortion Door to take a knockout on the same turn that you 1-hit KO or 2-hit KO a Blacephalon GX, therefore taking multiple knockouts at once will allow you to skip Beast Ring, and Blacephalon will struggle a little bit to take knockouts if it can't use Beast Ring. Obviously it's not too bad now because they've got Welder, but if you can skip Beast Ring, you have the option to. It's almost always correct to at least go for that out.
Yeah, and if you are playing Silvally, it's going to be a little bit tougher for you to find that because you can't just take the big knockout with a 1 prize attacker. You're probably going to need to use Silvally GX with a Water Memory, which we've got on our slide here. You can go for that Giratina play, or otherwise you're just trading with Blacephalon. Hopefully you can get your Water Memories down, find your triple accelerated to Turbo Drive and get in front first, but worst case scenario, you've still got Persian, you should be okay to get yourself going. It's just important that you're attacking before they are.
Well, yeah, it's like worst case scenario, you are just trading 2 for 2 with Blacephalon if you can't get your water attacks, or if you're not running them. You can just try and knock out 3 Blacephalons as quickly as possible, and often you can take your 6 prizes before they can, because with the Water Memory you can take 2 prizes with a Turbo Drive, you can use a GX attack to take another Blacephalon out, both Slashback with a Choice Band or pretty much any Rebel GX are both options to take a 1-hit KO on a Blacephalon, and then you've also got Vengeance, which in the late game should be able to reach 180 fairly easily.
Yeah, it just means that you're putting your chances of winning at a slight detriment. I feel like if you're playing Slowking or and Giratina or just Dugong by itself, then you'll almost 100% of the time win that matchup. But Silvally doesn't necessarily have a bad time, it's just you need to make sure that you're going just as fast as Blacephalon is. And Blacephalon goes pretty quickly.
It certainly does.
Talking about Blacephalon, if you're playing in the mirror and you're looking to try and beat another Blacephalon player, it's going to be tough because your strategy's pretty linear. Like a fire deck has a linear strategy. It just attaches lots of energy or blow something up. Like that's what fire decks do. So in order to kind of mitigate that weakness, you can do a couple of things. Firstly, you can attach a Beast Energy to your active Blacephalon and leave energy in play. So you only need to Lost Zone 3 fire instead of just the instead of the 4 to knock out a Blacephalon. That would be really good because that way you've got the extra kind of step that you need to go and take another knockout in the next turn.
And that's actually not even my favourite use for Beast Energy in this matchup, because if you are able to use Burst GX in the early game, take a free prize, you'll be on odd prizes for the rest of the game. In which case, you'll probably find yourself on 3 prizes eventually. And once you're on 3 prizes, you can use Turning Point with a Beast Energy actually to take a one-hit KO on a Blacephalon, and that could be the turning point of the game.
Good one, Jordan. That's almost as if Pokemon Company made the name exactly for that reason. Yeah, it gives you a good option to get that kind of nice prize trade. Obviously, Blacephalon on your opponent's side can burst as well to get off of the even prizes, but that's an attack that they need to make. A couple of other things that you can do. Persian GX is a potential tech that you could put in. You're going to have GX Pokemon getting knocked out pretty much every turn. So if you include Persian GX, then you've got the ability to catwalk and get yourself, I don't know, 2 Beast Ring.
Well, it seems like the mirror match is very much going to come down to whoever misses is going to lose. So if I have a card that's basically reads you cannot miss, I'd be feeling pretty confident.
Yeah, that seems fine by me. Like, I don't even need to use the attacks in this particular matchup. I just go, yeah, I'll grab a couple of Beast Rings and then, I don't know, I might let loose my opponents so that they have less of a chance of hitting their Beast Rings. That way I'm probably going to win this game.
Oh yeah, exactly. If the only way you can lose the game is by missing, then let loose is going to be your main way of hoping that they're the ones who end up missing and not you.
Yep, so probably a higher count of Marshadow with let loose is going to be the way to go to make sure that you're able to get that mirror in a favourable position. Obviously, it's still a mirror, so things need to go your way a little bit, but you never know, with some smart play with Beast Ring and some luck in inverted commas with Persian, you should be okay. This slide, Pikachu Zekrom, this is an interesting one, because for me, you just declare Tag Bolt as Pikachu Zekrom, and you should be alright. But it's not actually as simple as that. There's no one card that we can kind of include in Pikachu Zekrom to really swing this matchup. It's more about knowing how to play it.
It's a very fast-paced matchup because in a perfect world, what you want to do with Pikachu Zekrom is you want to just get the turn 1 full blitz, as you always do.
Yep, obviously.
You want to take a prize card, ideally, maybe knock out a Poipole or just something that they've put into play. It could be a let loose, anything really. You want to take 1 prize and set up 6 energy onto your Pikachu and Zekrom to go for a turn 2 Tag Bolt GX, which will allow you to take another 3 prizes, and all of a sudden you're not only down to your last 2 prizes, but more importantly, they won't have access to Beast Ring in this game, so you're never really going to fall behind from there. But it's easy enough to say that, but it's just as easy for your opponent to say, oh, I'm just going to knock out that Pikachu Zekrom in the active, and now that you can't really win.
Double Naganadel Welder attachment knockout, that's bad. So it's one of those interesting matchups where obviously things need to go correctly for both players in order for them to win. One of the things that we spoke about before actually recording the video was Zoroark GX. If you can at some point force your opponent to knock out a Zoroark GX, it means that Blacephalon needs to find 3 tag team knockouts. Or sorry, 3 knockouts on GXs. 3 GX knockouts, which means they're taking like 7 to 8 prizes. So you could give yourself an extra turn. The thing that you don't want to do is just make them Lost Zone 10 energy and win the game. Because if they knock out 2 Pikachu Zekrom, like, it's really easy for them to do. You need to force them to try and take uncomfortable prizes.
And it's not the easiest thing to do because obviously that involves powering up 3 different GX Pokemon that all need at least 3 energy to attack. One of them ideally uses 6, so you're asking for quite a bit of setup here. But they also need quite a bit, obviously, to keep trading with these Pokemon. So it's a very, very fast-paced matchup where I feel like all you really need is to have a consistent engine and just set up quicker than your opponent does. So 6 energy Zekrom as fast as you can seems like the safest way to win this matchup.
And worst comes to worst, like if things are going very, very poorly for you, then I guess you could like use Dedenne and use its GX attack to paralyze them and hope they miss Guzma or something. I don't know. Like you could try and do that. That's obviously very, very suboptimal, but yeah, you want to be like our little green shirted man in the corner and just declare tag bolt for game. That sounds pretty good.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Malamar variants. This is an interesting one. We've got lots of different kinds of Malamar floating around at the moment. Obviously, Ultra Necrozma has been one of the more popular versions, but you have to remember that Gascan was probably one of the top decks around when Blacephalon first had its big showings at tournaments. And some of the cards that beat Blacephalon then will still beat Blacephalon now.
And these are cards that it's not that unlikely to see popping up in Ultra Necrozma lists at the moment anyway, such as Dawnwing's Necrozma is certainly a respectable card to see teched into Ultra Necrozma for the Blacephalon matchup, because they're almost always going to be using Burst GX right at the beginning of the game, or if not, just taking a quick knockout on a non-GX in the most quick and efficient way possible, and then all you need is a Dawnwing's GX to come up a Moon's Eclipse, take a one-hit KO on their Blacephalon GX. And then, on the most important turn of the game, their B-String turn, they're probably not going to be able to attack you.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to take that GX knockout. They're going to need to do something a lot more inefficient. Obviously, Dawnwings still has that risk associated with it since it's Dark Week. So if you play Zoroark, you're going to be in trouble. But it's probably a good way of dealing with Blacephalon. Another good way is Necrozma GX. With Black Ray, you're able to, again, skip B-String, which is really important.
Yeah, I would say that Necrozma GX is probably the most efficient attacker overall against Blacephalon, just because you have both the option of just chucking 3 energy on it every turn and trying to go 2 for 2 against them for the entire match, or you can be a little more sneaky and try and half hit 2 different Blacephalon GXs and then take out both of them at once with Black Ray GX. Obviously, that's a play that's only going to be available if your opponent does put down 2 Blacephalon GX at the same time, and they're kind of not ready for this play. They can play around it if they want to, but even if they are playing around it, just Prismatic Burst is a fine attack in their matchup.
It certainly is, and Ultra Necrozma actually can deal with Blacephalon itself reasonably well. You can just go for the straight trade with Ultra Necrozma. You're able to knock out Blacephalons relatively reliably. Or, if you prefer, you can use things like Giratina, either to skip B-String turn, or to like set up some Shadow Impacts on some Blacephalon GXs and then Sky Scorching Light to take those prizes in the late game.
The Giratina is definitely my preferred attacker overall out of all of these Pokemon in the Blacephalon matchup, just because it's pretty awkward for Blacephalon to take out. It's 3 energy to Lost Zone for 1 prize card unless they have Beast Energy. And Giratina is at the very least taking a 2-hit KO on Blacephalon, so most importantly as well, your Giratina being weak to Dark means that Naganadel isn't going to be 1-hit KOing you.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Obviously, if you're playing something like Necrozma to take those knockouts, then you can get caught by a Naganadel with a Choice Band just coming out and taking a knockout, or even a Beast Energy. But Giratina is not going to have that problem as long as you don't accidentally put your 4 damage counters on yourself. You should be A-okay. But yeah, it's an interesting one for Malamar. I'd say you probably, step 1 is attack first. If you do, then you're all good. If you don't, Giratina's probably the way to go.
And that's exactly why it's an even matchup, isn't it?
Exactly. QUAGSIRE Naganadel. Here's our little green-shirted man again. This deck just wins. Like, is there a way that Blacephalon could possibly beat this?
Well, let's look at this for a second and say let's put our imaginary glasses on and pretend that QUAGSIRE is not a water type for a second.
Right, okay.
It's got 120 HP. It's a non-GX.
Yep.
So things are already looking bad, and it's 2-hit KOing a Blacephalon.
Yep.
So it's already looking pretty bad, right?
Yep.
And now we take our glasses off, and it 1-hit KOs a Blacephalon.
Yep. And if you knock it out, the Wishful Baton sends all of the energy just back to another QUAGSIRE to do another one-shot knockout. I guess Blacephalon could promote Naganadel to try and knock out a QUAGSIRE, except it only does it for 1 turn, and then your opponent's QUAGSIRE comes out and knocks out the Naganadel itself, or just attack with Naganadel. It's bad.
Yeah, it would actually just become a Naganadel war where the deck that can move its energy around is probably going to be more efficient at chaining Naganadels than you are.
Yep, and even if it was a bad, it wasn't a water type deck, You've got Volcanion Prism as well, which can spread damage, which could potentially skip B-String anyway. So, what are you going to do? Like, what's Blacephalon going to do?
I think it's going to hope for a brick, or it's going to concede.
Yep, I reckon that might be it. Hey, at least it's guaranteed to take a prize. You can just use that.
Use burst. Yeah.
Let's move on to ZAPDOS JIRACHI. Again, this is an average to bad matchup for Blacephalon. It's obviously not as bad as QUAGSIRE was, but again, ZAPDOS is a one-prize attacker that has more than 100 HP, so they need to commit 3 energy unless they've got the beast energy to take a knockout. And ZAPDOS is 2-hitting pretty much every turn.
It is, and it can also go for the classic JIRACHI ZAPDOS strategy, target down all those baby Poipoles and make it even harder for Blacephalon to chain those 3 energy attacks every turn.
Yeah, so if you're desperate to try and swing the matchup, you play something like Buzzwole. Buzzwole in the Zap Beasts version of the deck has already seen quite a lot of popularity. It's just another attacker that has more than 100 HP that can half hit a Blacephalon, so it just gives you an extra out to doing that. Sledgehammer doing 150. That can combo quite nicely with Shrine of Punishment, where you can potentially set yourself up some nice knockouts with ZAPDOS to skip Beast Ring or just to put yourself in front.
And if you're lucky enough to have the Beast Energy at the right time, you can actually use Sledgehammer to get a one-hit KO on a Blacephalon when they're on the 4-prize turn, which they're not really going to be able to skip because you're not putting GXs down realistically. So Sledgehammer with a Choice Band and a Beast Energy, even without Shrine of Punishment, is just getting a clean one-hit KO on a Blacephalon GX.
That is true, and if you are interested in playing Jolteon GX, what ZAPDOS used to play back in the day, it's got 2 good attacks that are going to do similar things to what we've been speaking about beforehand. Electro Bullet can potentially skip a Beast Ring turn if you need to, spreading damage around the board, and Swift Run GX can do the same kind of thing that Dawn Wings can do. A couple of Electro Power and you're suddenly doing a one-shot on this on Blacephalon, which means that it's not going to be able to take a knockout in the next turn.
Obviously, it's a strategy that can backfire in theory because you are putting a GX Pokemon down, so you're giving them access to a fairly easy 2-prize cards. Just 4 energy for 2 prizes is much more efficient than 3 energy for 1 prize, like most of the other attackers provide. But Jolteon does definitely have the potential to swing the game really heavily in your favour if you can pull it off at the right time.
Yeah, so definitely worth considering, but ZAPDOS JIRACHI probably has a reasonably good matchup regardless. Some final thoughts on Blacephalon. It's an excellent deck if you're going up against things like Stall, Reshiram, and Zoro Silvally. Really, really good. But if you play any other deck, then there's going to be a lot of trouble.
Yeah, even its even matchups, I would be inclined to feel like Blacephalon is a little unfavored even in those matchups, even though they are fairly close. I would almost always rather be the player sitting across from Blacephalon rather than being the player who is playing Blacephalon.
Well, it comes down to this, and it's something that Jordan has said multiple times, and he said it in our video when we talked about it. Blacephalon as a deck sometimes just doesn't work because your opponent doesn't take knockouts, or you don't draw Welder at the right time, or whatever it is. It sometimes just stops.
Sometimes it just doesn't function.
Yep, you just need to wait until your opponent does something for your deck to do what it needs to do. And if you're waiting for your opponent to make a move, then your opponent controls how you play the game. And if your opponent is good enough at controlling the way that you play the game, they're going to control you in such a way that you lose. So it's probably not a good place to be.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Mitch.
Yeah, so, hey. But still, good against Reshiram. Reshiram's pretty good, so play away.
That might be a reason enough to consider it for a tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, it looks really, really good post-rotation as well, apart from the fact that there's a 1-card counter that every single deck in the format can play.
Yeah, well, there is rumours about what that card actually does. I've heard some people think that the translation is wrong, so we'll have to wait and see when it comes out as to whether that actually happens or not.
We'll see. But for the moment, Blacephalon definitely one to keep in the binder. It's a good deck, but there's definitely ways to beat it. Thanks, Jordan.
No problem.
And thanks everyone for coming along. If you like the content, please click the little sable eye in the middle of the screen. On the left-hand side, it'll take you to one of the videos that YouTube thinks that you might like, and on the right is our Unbroken Bonds playlist. For more from the sable eyes, thanks everyone for coming along, and we'll see you all next time. Bye.